Hi, and welcome to another episode of Rule of Carnage. This is where myself, Glenn Ford, a games designer and developer, chats to this guy, Mike Hutchinson, also a games designer and developer, and we have chats about developing and designing better miniatures games. Specifically at the moment, we're in a little series of conversations about what it is what we are working on at the moment, and designing very specifically better versions of our own miniatures games that are in the early kicking around stages. Some of these are quite sort of early development ideas, and a week or two ago I think Mike hit me up with a email about a thing he's been fiddling around with called, for the moment, Berserker.
It's currently called Berserker, yeah.
Currently called Berserker. So you sort of pitched this as several things. One sort of, I mean, the thing that we might talk about quite a bit in this conversation is the fact that it is a relatively random number generator free game, which is always interesting, I think, for a skirmish game, and making that interesting. B, it's a solo primarily, if not only. At the moment it's solo only.
At the moment it's solo only, yeah.
That's more about sort of, you're like Doom guy or someone like that, and you've got hordes coming at you, and it's mainly about like kill chaining together massive numbers of death.
Right, and actually the design, like the initial kernel of the design challenge was, is it at all possible for a miniatures game to feel urgent or exciting in that way that like adrenaline thumping first person shooters with a, you know, on a PC or a console are? And almost certainly the answer is no, but I wanted to just have a little run at that wall and see how much it hurts to try and make it work. So that's where like a lot of the things for Berserker emerged from. Like, one is, obviously I've been playing Doom 2016 recently, absolutely loving it. Like the game design in that for me is like incredibly pure and focused, and the soundtrack is absolutely killer. But the sort of experience of getting through a wave of enemies and the sort of rush of satisfaction having like completed that wave, and the experience of like bouncing from one monster to another, all of these things felt like something that would be possible to capture in a tabletop game. And so I was trying to figure out like, what are the, and this is to a degree a continuation of the thought process that I've been running through with Hobgoblin. It's like, how can I remove all of the impediments between like the moving the miniatures and the like excitement of killing and the next like success and the next success. And so sort of the process was, as with most of the game designs, it was like asking some questions and then chatting to some people. And so I was chatting to the Blaster crew about this particularly, and wondering about, thinking back to like, if the thing that you do is kill monsters in a really cool way, then like it's almost becoming like this thing where like, if something is really cool that you do, like, why do you have to make a dice roll to be cool? Why can't you just be cool and then build the game to make it difficult to be cool all of the time, or as cool as you can possibly be all of the time, and just let you struggle at that kind of meta thing? So in this case, the game throws a ridiculous number of monsters at you that have some AI system that isn't brilliant yet, but you know, I'll go back and watch our episode on AI design and make it better. But the point is that you've got a very sharp timer on the game. So there's going to be sort of 3 turns and then the next wave starts, another 2 turns and then the next wave starts. And now, like, if you haven't killed anything, there's probably like 40 models on the table that are all trying to kill you, and you're definitely going to die. And you start with maybe 2 or 3 activations per turn, like activation points. But the point is that if you can successfully kill a monster, you get an activation point. And if you can successfully kill another, then you get another. And if you can glory execute them with some, you know, in some way that's really cool that you've set up, then you get more action points. And so this like kill chain that you set up where by killing you get to kill more, then that's sort of like asking you like almost like a pinball machine. Like, can you wait for the pieces to come together in exactly the right way so that you can pinball from one thing to another using your weapons and your ammunition and swapping in the right way and setting up the right kills? And it just felt like, you know, the basic problem of geometry, which is a tabletop war game, like this just came to life very immediately in my imagination of like, oh, okay, creating kill chains requires AI enemies and you to eyeball the situation, and certainly no pre-measuring and so forth.
Yeah, because I think that's an interesting, that last comment is a very, I think, interesting point there, the no pre-measuring comment, because I think that is one of so the thing about like a video game like Doom and whatever is that you have that feeling when you get into, I think they call it flow state, where you're just you're hammering through things. And the game that I really enjoyed, you know, way back when for that was Prince of Persia, where it was one of those early parkouring games, and you were getting it right, and you're running down walls and flipping back and forth, and obviously also what game designers want to do for video games is occasionally put in these like brick walls so that you have that moment of the flow stopping, so you know you have a line to climb and something to get over and a next step. And the thing is, obviously tabletop games can't I don't know, I don't think they can give you that flow state thing, just because they can't have the speed, you know, that they may find it much harder to test things like dexterity and those sort of immediate visual spatial reasoning moments.
I mean, I think that is why competitive Malifaux was so intoxicating for me, because I could lose, you know, an hour and 20 minutes in a competitive Malifaux match and come out like a drained husk of a man, like with a dry mouth, simply because of the act of like losing myself in the cognitive energies of this and that, and this connects to that, and these things connect to that, and that cascades over there. And that, I think, was very much a successful flow state, that sort of execution.
And I think, funnily enough, I think this links interestingly into the idea of no randomness, because so in a previous conversation I was saying that one of the things that I don't like about tabletop mass battle games is the fact that you should as a gentleman tell the other person if you're spotting something visually that they haven't seen, because that's felt like it's a sort of gentleman's agreement that information in tabletop games is meant to be like open information, certainly the information about where things are on the tabletop. And if I can see something you can't see, and I know that you can't see it, and I can see you doing things because you're unaware of my vantage point, it does actually, it sort of behooves me to say, look, I know that you think you're in cover there. I have to tell you, you're just not. You know, you just aren't. I can see that you aren't. And that often destroys a lot of what would be the tension in those games. Because what I want to do is, when I want to sit there going,
right, they move it along that spectrum from pure competitive to collaborative narrative storytelling. Like it's not 100% swing, but it's like, okay, we've agreed to slightly collaborate on this.
Yeah, and I think, and what I want to do is I want to sit there going, oh, is he going to see it? Is he going to see it? Oh, he's not seeing it. He's not seeing it. Yeah, you know,
right, like in a game of chess or something, when you set up a trap and it's like, I'm not going to tell you that I've set a trap up, like that's ridiculous.
But the thing is, the point, obviously in chess, it's definitely fair that he doesn't see your trap, because he can see your trap. He can definitely physically see it.
Yeah.
In a tabletop miniatures game, maybe it's not fair.
Chess with true line of sight. Let's go right it.
Yeah, but in a tabletop miniatures game, it might be that it's not fair that he can't see your trap. It might be that it's like, well, you know, we should have given him the opportunity. And I feel like a lot of the time, those sorts of games, in order to replace the tension of hiding things from your enemy at that point, put in dice rolls, because dice rolls give you tension. Oh, am I going to manage to do this thing or not? Oh, I'll have to roll the dice to find out. Is a moment of tension. And the question is how valuable a moment of tension that is, how much that sort of getting yourself out of, do you know what I mean? Out of a corner where you've maybe drained too much of the tension out in order to give a sort of more gentlemanly experience at the tabletop.
That's funny, because where I imagined you were going with that as you opened that salvo was, if you're in a flow state and you're experiencing like the sort of skill of solving the puzzle, then there is potentially a really like handbrake moment where a random dice roll just kind of like pulls you out of that flow state, because the random dice roll just goes like, no, you're not allowed to have fun anymore because the random die. And it makes me think of, like, we both play a lot of Arkham Horror, the card game, and when I play that on my own, I take out the auto fail, because I don't want that moment of like, I'm having fun, I'm having fun, I'm having fun. Game says you're not having fun anymore, like pack it up, restart it. Like, I just don't want it. It doesn't, it's always a negative experience in the middle of that game. And so potentially, if you're in the middle of something which is an enjoyable kind of flow statey type sort of, and I mean, this was part of the design imaginings for this game, was like, could you make it skill based in some way that's, I mean, to a degree, all of these games are skill based, but like, is there a way of amping up the skill by taking away some of the randomness? But there's also maybe a relationship where it's like, well, the randomness is getting in the way of my enjoyment, because it's sort of determining the pace in a way that might not be suiting what I'm currently experiencing.
And I think it's interesting because I mean, what this game is doing, I think what it's doing is it's essentially building a sort of emergent puzzle. Because the one spot of randomness is where the monsters turn up. The monsters.
Yes, you've got 6 spawn points and maybe 10 monsters spawn, so you roll 10d6 and you position them around the portal that they just popped out of. Yeah. Which is just simply because I couldn't think of a better situation for that. And it could be that, as we talked about in a previous conversation, like level design might be really a critical part of this, because like in the history of Doom, like level design and Doom are they're very tightly linked. And so I'm also really intrigued about this, of like, anyway, like, finish your thought. I'll get to mine.
Well, no, because that is the question, because at the moment it is a randomly emergent puzzle that occurs. You randomly generate where the monsters are going to turn up, and then you've got a limited number of resources. You've got to get to a certain kill point through the monsters, and you presumably sit there and go, okay, if I do that one, then that one, that'll be this many kill points, and I do that one, then that one, I'll cost me an action point, and I'll get an action point back, and then I'll get a kill state and a kill chain, and that'll give me double action points, and I can stun that monster and glory kill him and get double action points, which will let me go over to that group of monsters, and do that until you've figured out on the tabletop in your head the whole sort of mental state of, yes, I can be an absolute badass, watch me be a badass, and then send about badassing around the tabletop. And if that's like an enjoyable puzzle to solve, what's interesting in a way is that,
yeah, and so interrupting that with a failed dice roll would be a deeply unsatisfying moment.
I suppose the question ends up being is, if I can sit there and look at the tabletop and mutter in my head and actually figure it out, then the bit when if I go from that to then doing it on the tabletop, the doing it on the tabletop is potentially busy work.
Potentially, yeah.
Because there are no dice to be rolled. There's no question as to whether I'm going to succeed. I could potentially look at the tabletop, sit there for 5 minutes, and then go, yeah, I have in fact won.
Seen it. Yeah, I've seen the chess puzzle solution.
And I think, and that's one of the reasons randomness is attractive, because that way, with randomness, no matter how hard I think, I don't know until I discover that it preserves the moment of exploration for me. And it's why I think it's very interesting that you drop that no pre-measuring statement into it, because that is the option where it's like, I know people for whom pre-measuring is essentially meaningless, because they can look at the tabletop, and if they say it's X distance from something else, it's that distance from something else.
Right, and this game uses Gasland templates, and I don't think there are people who are using Gasland's templates enough to like perfectly eyeball them.
I mean,
but
I have been at a point in my life when I definitely was.
But like the design goal is, as much as like Gaslands was trying to say, you keep the templates on the table, because I'm trying to simulate like twitchy decision making at high speeds, and you're never going to know exactly where you are. Like, I want this to be a first-person shooter, like you don't have like total top-down visibility of what you're up to. You can't really see where all the monsters are. Like how to replicate that. It's almost like a fog of war. It's like a perspective. It's like I can't see everything and I can't exactly judge distances and stuff. So like I think as I continue to work on the design, like figuring out like what exactly the no pre-measuring rule is. And I think you're right, like introducing intriguing moments of randomness that are just enough to stick a fly in the honeypot, but not enough to basically have the game tell you whether you win or not.
I mean, because the thing I do when I play Arkham is if I get the red token, it doesn't go back in the bag until the end of the turn.
Right.
So I'm willing to accept the auto fail happening because I feel like that's the nature of Arkham, but I'm not willing to accept, you know, a
Twice
top
in a turn.
professor trying to read the newspaper and just dribbling out of his eyes 3 times in a row. It's like once, yeah, fair enough, Arkham. That's an acceptable. That's acceptable. If you just do it 3 times in a row, so I just literally can't open the front door because I'm like, oh no,
No one's having fun at that point.
and I'm stuck in my house, then you can absolutely do one. And I think the question is, it's like randomness can be interesting, and when it's controlled in a very specific way, and totally taking it out has that potential of finding those moments when the inaction on the tabletop, if you see far enough ahead, is potentially just like, yeah, I know all of this is happening. I'm sort of annoyed I have to move the stuff around now. Can't you just take my word for it? I'll tell you what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen, and then I'll just move my guy to the far end of the table, clear off everything between where he is in there. And why am I having to go through the steps of taking off these things one at a time? I've done this in my head, and it was fun in my head. This is just like, and what's more is it's a solo game, so no one's even watching me do that. There's no way when I'm playing solo, if I've mapped it out in my head, I'm then moving the damn things around the tabletop. I'm sweeping the tabletop, putting him where I know it's going to be, and you can come and arrest me, you know, fun police.
And it's so weird that the random dice roll should be the difference between those two things, because it certainly isn't for me. I mean, I know, like, I was busily designing the game, but like I'm much more of a pushing toy soldiers around type character. Like I genuinely take in like visceral sort of aesthetic and physical pleasure from just like moving the toy soldiers around. And to a degree, like the systems of combat resolution are there to facilitate like more moving around of toy soldiers. But I totally understand where you're coming from. I think it's absolutely spot on, in order to create a game that is actually satisfying for both sort of sides of that.
Potentially.
That derision of pleasure from like an intellectual assessment of the puzzle to a tactile exploration of the puzzle.
So are you, because I know I'm willing to put up the show note in the show notes, horribly work in progress pieces. Are you willing to put up Berserker in the show notes for this episode?
No, I'm not. I don't know what state it'll be in that. I've got about 4 or 5 different things I'm working on at the same time. I do know that this is very likely to end up in Blaster at some point, because this is exactly the size and shape of a cool Blaster sort of micro game.
Okay.
There's a whole other topic about like, this is one of those games that like, because it's got level design buzzing around in my head, and because it's like a series of solo games, like, oh my god, I want to put a campaign system in this. Like I want it to be dripping in the campaign system. Like I don't even know that you can play it unless you're playing the campaign system. Like I think it has levels. I think it has a story mode. I think that's just what it is. Anyway. But no, I'm going to keep this one under my hat for a hot minute here.
Okay. Well, if you've watched through to this point and you're horribly disappointed to not have extremely early access to Mike's festering design brain, complain in the comments section and call him an awful, awful person. And tell us what you think about random number generation free tabletop miniatures games. Have you seen it done well? Have you seen it done at all? Do you think it might be, you know, a bridge too far? Because there's a little bit of random number generation in this game. I really am curious to see if you can pull off anyone can pull off a.
Have you ever played Warhammer by just replacing all the dice rolls with the statistical outcomes?
Certain armies become incredibly good and certain armies become incredibly bad. I've done it a little bit. It becomes pointless because some armies are just invincible at that point. Yes, have you played a random number generation free tabletop miniatures game? If so, tell us about it. Tell us how you feel about random number generation. Does it enrage you? Do you desperately want Mike to create a solo random number generation free game to stop yourself being destroyed by the red squids of Arkham Horror and other things of that nature? Generally, drop your comments into the comment section about the projects and ideas and thoughts that we're having, that you're having. Look us up on social media. But for now, from this episode of Rule of Carnage, I think it's going to be thank you and goodbye. So bye.
Bye.
Bye.